And this is the part most people overlook. Without decisive action now, the future of Africa's smallholder farmers appears precariously fragile, risking collapse under the weight of climate change. These farmers, who form the backbone of food and nutrition security across the continent, are faced with an escalating series of climate disruptions. Think extreme heat waves, unpredictable droughts, devastating floods, and unprecedented temperature swings that strike simultaneously, creating what's often called a perfect storm. Unfortunately, many of these farmers are ill-prepared and lack the resources to withstand such shocks. Even with some adaptation efforts, estimates show that by 2100, yields of staple crops could decrease by around 24%, threatening the very foundation of food production. They are fighting on multiple fronts: climate stressors, limited infrastructure, and scant support. Without enough help, their resilience is in jeopardy. The world simply cannot afford to ignore their plight. The stakes are too high. And as these climate surprises become less rare, the challenge grows ever more urgent. Smallholder farmers are usually the first to feel the brunt of climate impacts. They typically have limited savings or safety nets, no endless reserves of water or energy, and no backup food supplies. When droughts hit, or pests like the fall armyworm infest their crops, they often have no contingency plan. Sometimes it's too much rain flooding their fields and homes. Other times, droughts leave them parched. All situations that push them to the point of forced migration, becoming climate refugees within their own countries. These internal displacements further threaten social stability and threaten the future of local farming communities. Focusing on sub-Saharan Africa, the vulnerability becomes even clearer. Nearly 95% of farmers rely exclusively on rain-fed agriculture, which is extremely sensitive to variations in rainfall and weather patterns. Over recent years, rainy seasons have shortened and become less predictable, while droughts and floods are happening more frequently. For instance, in 2021, the Horn of Africa endured its worst drought in over 40 years, wrecking harvests and causing millions to face hunger. Without urgent mitigation, such droughts are likely to persist, especially as the region suffers from 3 consecutive years of failed rainy seasons. Temperatures rising due to climate change threaten to cut crop yields further, with dire consequences for health and economies. If Earth's temperature increases by 4 degrees by 2100, a likely scenario, yields of key crops like maize in some parts of Africa could plummet by over 20%. Considering maize supplies nearly half of the calories and proteins in southern and eastern Africa, this would be catastrophic. Even at a more moderate 2 degrees Fahrenheit rise, staple crop yields could drop by 5 to 10%. With more significant impacts in vulnerable zones. Without serious adaptation measures, productivity of rain-fed farms will decline, worsening food insecurity. If warming surpasses these levels, the outlook worsens. Larger areas could become unsuitable for crops like maize, millet, and sorghum. The impact extends beyond simply decreasing quantity. Climate change also degrades the nutritional content of crops. Research indicates that higher CO2 levels correlate with lower levels of vital nutrients such as protein, iron, zinc, and vitamin B in staples like rice, further exacerbating malnutrition. Economically, climate change chips away at national income. For example, Tanzania experienced a 20% decline in export earnings over the last 40 years, partly linked to a rise in temperature exceeding 1 degree Celsius. The broader African continent may require around $50 billion annually just to implement effective climate resilience measures. No small sum, but it's not just the crops that are suffering. Our traditional knowledge systems, passed down through generations for predicting rainfall and optimal planting times, are increasingly unreliable. Erratic weather, new pests, and invasive diseases, such as the fall armyworm, are overwhelming these age-old methods, leading to lower yields and higher crop failures. Many farmers are left without effective ways to adjust their practices in this unpredictable climate landscape, compounded by declining investments in agricultural science. Despite progress in global agriculture thanks to technological advancements and increased investments, Africa's yields remain stubbornly low, just 1.2 to 2.8 tons per hectare for maize, compared to a projected global average of approximately 6.5 tons by 2034. The potential under optimal conditions could be around 10.4 tons per hectare. Similar disparities exist for wheat and rice, where regional yields trail far behind achievable benchmarks, highlighting the widening yield gap, an increasingly critical concern as climate change pushes productivity even lower. Within Africa, the most vulnerable are often women, the elderly, and people with disabilities. Rising temperatures place pregnant women and children at particular risk, with heat exposure during pregnancy leading to health crises for both mother and child. These groups generally have fewer resources, less access to education and extension services, and are frequently excluded from formal markets. The limited number of extension workers, sometimes just one for every 1,000 farmers, means vital advice on new seeds, nutritionally balanced fertilizers, and weather forecasts often doesn't reach those who need it most. While AI and digital platforms show promise for supporting farmers, they remain in early stages with many hurdles, trust, language barriers, and local relevance that need addressing. What's needed is a comprehensive, multi-layered approach. There's no single fix for this complex crisis, but rather a set of coordinated strategies. Developing new crop varieties that can withstand drought, extreme heat, and pests. Research institutes like the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA, are leading efforts to produce resilient seeds. Promoting sustainable farming practices such as integrated soil fertility management, crop diversification, and climate-smart agriculture, which includes planting a mix of cereals, legumes, vegetables, and underutilized crops like cowpeas or orange-fleshed sweet potatoes that are suited to marginal conditions and boost both soil health and nutrition. Harnessing digital advisory tools, mobile alerts, weather forecasts, and tailored recommendations that can help farmers adapt on the fly. Platforms like CGIAR's AgWise have already improved crop yields by up to 30% in some areas. Strengthening farmer education through field schools, demonstration projects, and peer learning to promote the adoption of innovative techniques. Investing in policy research, long-term trials, and climate modeling to inform decision-makers and scale successful solutions. Partnerships between scientists and policymakers are key to guiding investments and prioritizing research that matters. Ensuring that boosting crop productivity doesn't come at the expense of nutrition. Climate change can diminish the nutritional quality of staples, making achieving hidden hunger, micronutrient deficiencies, even more challenging. Diversifying crops and prioritizing underutilized species not only improves diet quality, but also enhances resilience. Initiatives by organizations like IITA emphasize this integrated approach. Funding innovation itself, international donors, governments, and the global community must pool resources to support research, develop climate-smart technologies, and scale solutions. Organizations like IITA that combine scientific rigor with community engagement are essential for fostering a more resilient agricultural future. All these efforts emphasize one core idea. Agriculture is inherently local. Each farm, each community, has unique conditions and needs. Building trust by involving farmers in co-creating solutions is vital. They should have ownership of initiatives, receive fair credit, and access support like insurance and microfinance to invest in sustainable improvements. Providing relevant, actionable information, market prices, weather updates, farming tips, aligned with their everyday challenges rather than academic jargon will make a real difference. A farm's diversity is its greatest strength. Relying solely on monocultures makes crops vulnerable to pests, climate shocks, and market fluctuations. Promoting agrobiodiversity, including crops better suited for tough conditions, helps distribute risks and build resilience, providing both ecological benefits and economic stability. But ignoring these warnings comes at a steep price. If current trends continue unchecked, Africa's smallholder farmers, and by extension, global food security, face a future of deepening crises, increased malnutrition, impoverishment, and displacement. The climate crisis is no longer just an environmental issue. It's a humanitarian and economic emergency. Some forecasts predict over 40% of the population could suffer from malnutrition by 2030 if urgent action isn't taken. So the real question becomes, how long can the world afford to delay investment and intervention before we reach a point of no return? And do we accept the risk of more conflict, inequality, and suffering? The stakes are enormous, and the time to act is suddenly running out.